Everything good in life is forged on the anvil of adversity. We want to start a movement of high achievers that have the courage to fashion a life of greatness. A movement of those brave enough to face the fires of self-improvement on the journey to peak expression. Smiths build things. Smiths get the job done. We are All Smiths. Welcome to the All Smith Project, where greatness is forged, not found. Move fast and break shit. LSKD develops functional sportswear with a streetwear aesthetic that's on a mission to inspire you to chase the vibe through sport, fitness, and adventure. I train daily in the rep shorts and love the versatility they offer. The zipper pocket is an absolute game changer. I go from training at the gym directly to meetings, running errands, or prepping for podcasts. The LSKD tribe has become true family, and we are excited to continue to develop our community. Shop now at lskd.com and use code ALLSMITH. We chase the vibe here at All Smith. Let's all become 1% better every day. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the All Smith Project. Today's guest is a former professional baseball player turned fitness coach. He's a gym owner, an entrepreneur, an author, and a consultant. But honestly, a really good friend, a fellow member of Team Too Tall, and in my opinion, one of the most interesting people on the planet to talk to. I'm excited to introduce Logan Gelbrich. What's up, man?
Hey, how are you? Thanks for the intro. Intros are always wild. You know, it feels weird to hear other people talk about you.
It's also insane that you've done all of those different things, man.
Getting old. I just had a birthday. I'm getting up there.
38, man.
Yeah, that's right.
What's it feel like to know that you're a couple of years till 40?
It is weird. Having that birthday definitely had it on my mind. You know, it's cool. I don't know. I think growing up, life's fun, and growing up is the journey. And so, yeah, just, it's cool to like get to these certain parts and reflect, you know. It's also the end of the year. It's like generally a time of reflection. Big birthdays are a time of reflection. And so, yeah, it's nice. I think it's nice to look back.
It's cool. I recently had a conversation with a buddy, and it was around the concept of like, we have deaths and we have rebirths typically close to every decade. Mm-hmm. And we just happen to be talking about where we were at 18 versus 28, and then 28 versus like 34, 35. Yeah. Like, there's a lot that changes in those in-between moments. And I look back at like 18 to 22, I was a completely different person.
Totally.
And I briefly mentioned that to you offline today. What does that bring to mind for you? Like, where your headspace was back when you were in pursuit of professional baseball versus now being this high-level entrepreneur that's just like trying to spin all the plates all at once?
Yeah, I mean, a friend of mine, Brian Chontosh, do you know Brian?
I don't.
Tosh is a legend. He is a legend for many reasons that we don't have enough terabytes in your podcast technology to talk about, but I'm paraphrasing. He says it very colorfully, like, you know, when I was a private, he had a military background. He's like, when I was new, he's like, I thought I knew everything, and I know for sure I was an idiot. You know, and then I became the next thing, and he's like, I can look back and I know for sure I was an idiot. But at the time I was like, I'm the guy, whatever. And the progression is obvious. And so that obviously means that right now we are subject to that thing. You know, I think I talk quite a bit in the education side or consulting side or, you know, developmental side of what I do, about progression like that, and this idea of transcendence of who we currently are. And that's all fine and dandy in theory, you know. And I was just joking about a couple of days ago. The internet now does a really good job of reminding you how brutal you were 10 years ago. This video popped up, and it was the first time I hopped on a camera at the gym, and I think it's 10 years old, this video, and I'm trying to articulate flow, which was eventually a big part of the book that I wrote and all this stuff. And I thought I was just dropping knowledge. Okay. And I reposted it just cheeky, I think on my Instagram stories, and a student at the gym came up to me and she was like, I'm so glad. I love that you reposted that video. And I'm thinking she's like gassing me up and like saying something nice. She was like, I watched the whole thing, you know, a lot of times, and I have no idea what you were talking about. and she got to the punchline, which is like, I think you are a level 10 out of 10 communicator. I think you can communicate as good as anybody I know. And just seeing that was really inspiring, because if you were that bad, I could get good at it. And I was like, oh, okay.
You know what's so fascinating about that though is like, you are so disciplined with your writing. We briefly talked about how you write roughly 5 blogs a week. And it's like early on, you have a lot of concept and ideation, and it's very challenging and difficult to share that with the world. But the moment you start writing, it fills the gaps within our thinking. Mm-hmm. And then it assists in your ability to translate that and communicate that appropriately to your audience. So I also think it just shows the discipline of the last decade of you putting pen to paper or finger to laptop to really digest a lot of what you're trying to communicate in a very progressive fashion, where it's understood at roughly a 3rd to 5th grade level rather than being up in the clouds where most people are going to like woo-woo about it.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, we're learning about just a lot of what's available to us from the process of writing. Of course, in the moment, I wasn't doing it in that contrived of a way. I was writing because I was trying to create value and express something in a way that maybe suited me as like a shy person. You know, but yeah, there's a remarkable thing that happens from reading and writing, I believe. I'm not naturally good at anything. I think sometimes people are like, well, you're such a good writer, it's unfair. You know,
you put in the reps, man.
Yeah, nothing short of like wanting to smack them. I want to say, you know, there's a little practice that went into that. You know, I'm not naturally good at this. Mm-hmm. Public speaking, I was tormented my whole life by the idea of speaking in front of people, especially groups. I mean, I would cry tears in school from ages, you know, I think 2nd grade, we started reciting poems, and I was a great student. I would fail every single time. 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. In high school, I'm crying in front of my class and I can't articulate my words. This is something that just plagued me. And so, similar thing, the feedback I get in my life now is, oh my gosh, you're such a gifted speaker. And I just want to be like, you have no idea what you're saying right now. Totally. This is only reps. This is the only thing you're looking at is repetition. And I noticed that reading made me a better speaker and a better writer. Writing, of course, had the same effect. And I don't know whether you're going to publish something or not, that practice does a great job of helping you organize your thoughts in a structured way. And I just want, the last thing I'll say about that is it is so frustrating to many people, like discouraging. And I just want to like try to normalize as much as possible. Anybody who you are looking towards that is maybe good at something or better at something than you probably just had a little more willingness to endure that discomfort.
Yeah. Meaning
like, can I write a sentence, not like it, erase it and try it again? And that sounds like super like something someone say on a podcast. But that is as true of a statement as I can say.
It's kind of the concept of like write to edit. I think we as human beings almost romanticize the success of others, and we like build them up because typically we know the outcome, so we're looking from like the success backwards. But when you're actually experiencing it, as you're describing, with learning how to public speak, learning how to write things that are publishable, it's like from your lens, there's imposter syndrome, there's misspelling of words, mm-hmm. there's frustration and not being able to access the word. Maybe it's synonyms or thesaurus.com or things like that to try to like better articulate. But I also think the consistent practice of reading, the consistent practice of writing behind closed doors, doing the thing, not talking about the thing, not thinking about the thing, but actually consistently doing the thing, mm-hmm. allows you to kind of leverage that crack in the door to then pursue this reservoir of potential that maybe the optimist in you really believed was there, but then the pessimist in you like brought yourself down based on the credibility of the actuality of what was performed in front of others. Yeah. But then you stubbornly persisted over the course of time. And now true confidence is what? I can look back and I have an honest track record of why I am the way I am because I did the thing consistently.
Yeah, you had the data. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's totally it. And definitely I didn't want to hear it when people were like, yo, you just got to get in front of people and you got to keep trying. Like I was the last person who wanted to sign up for that. But you're right. And I think those reps are where it's at. I just, I'll say this. I wish it was another way. I wish there was some other truth to this like skill development thing. There's just not. And it turns out that communication is pretty front and center with most every expression. I mean, doesn't matter the industry, doesn't matter the skill set. You're largely going to be, I haven't thought this before, but maybe we're going to roll it out. I say a thing about fitness. I go, regardless of the specificity of your physical goal, you'll either be supported or hindered by your level of GPP readiness. It's a statement I say a lot. Well, I think what's just come to me right now as I'm sitting with you is in most any interpersonal undertaking, relationship, business, or whatever, that's probably going to be either supported or hindered by your communication skills, readiness, right? And so I can't really think of someone who would not benefit from doing the due diligence on developing that craft. The examples are crazy too, and we all know these folks. There are so many people who are so much smarter and more informed and more technical that just are not able to have success because they can't take the brilliance and communicate it to the world. There are people who have way less coaching ability, way less knowledge, way less X, Y, and Z, who are able to create value in the world. And that's true for scientists and doctors. And, how many brilliant doctors are stuck in an unmarketable conversation because they can't translate what they know into the world, for example.
I think it gets limited a little bit by the story that we tell ourselves, right? We compartmentalize ourselves based on societal norms. And that's like, hey, I'm a doctor. I'm not a communicator. I'm not a public speaker. And we get labeled by that title, and then we just kind of soften and put ourselves into a box. Mm-hmm. But if we're able to shift that narrative a little bit, and on this concept of communication, it's not just external communication, it's intrinsic communication and our self-talk.
Yeah.
What kinds of things do you teach in some of your seminars and your hold the standard summits around the concept of self-talk? Because that's probably where it needs to begin, is that narrative that we tell ourselves before we're able to articulate to others.
Yes, self-talk is at the heart of confidence. I think a lot of Michael Gervais' work, I think, is probably closest to home on validating what I just said, so folks can check out his work. But you said it earlier, self-talk that is not supported by data, so it wouldn't be then believable, isn't real confidence. That's like projecting swagger internally or externally that is unearned. It just sort of falls flat, And so I think our communication needs to be met with experience and data. A lot of the communication work that I touch on in the Hold the Standard Summit and the educational work that we talk about, it's actually less granular. I mean, that's probably a good call to action to move towards self-talk. And it's more 10,000 foot view around objectivity. So a lot of our language and communication is around how can we increase the objectivity of any scenario, right? And I find that folks you can be as charismatic as all get out, but if your language is very subjective, vague, unclear, the things that you're saying aren't very actionable. They're not very effective, et cetera. So if we can
not tangible for people to grab, put in their pocket, and then put to use that day.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we hammer on this in ways in the strength and conditioning world that you would recognize that are very specific and maybe intense. But in our coaches development program, you could never say go grab a heavy kettlebell because I don't know what that means. You know what I mean? It's like to increase the objectivity. It's like you should be able to perform this task like 8 to 12 times, you know, without any more warm up. Like, oh, that's bringing more objectivity to a very subjective thing. You got 30 people standing in front of you. What does heavy mean, right? And so anything that we say, the way I look at it is on a sliding scale, almost like a knob of volume. And you can trend that towards subjectivity or objectivity. And it just pays to speak more objectively in any context. You know, we're trying to make this work explicit. You know, anybody who's been in a relationship of any kind knows that assumptions will kill us, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so assumptions are around non-explicit, subjective, vague language, you know, or lack thereof, right? And so anytime we can bring objectivity, anything that you're going to say is going to just land harder, be easier to hold someone to account to, more effective, etc.
And another takeaway that I'm seeing here, in my opinion, you're a master of curiosity. And I think that stems from the fact that you are able to take a 10,000 view, a 5,000 view, and then shift to be, from my perspective, from your perspective, from a third person's perspective. And there's variance and variables associated with that. And I think that comes from the 5 perceptual positions, things that I've heard you speak on before. And I think we're subconsciously kind of touching on them within this conversation around communication, but I'm excited to unpack that a little bit with you.
Yeah. 5 perceptual positions is a tool that I think can be life-changing. I'm a little bit of a nut for frameworks. I realize that frameworks are like techniques, and techniques are good. It's not the whole picture, but let's talk about it, and folks that are listening can steal it. One of the beauties of this framework is that when you make it explicit, meaning like say it out loud to like a group of people listening or you and I, we can't now unknow this. So we share this language, and now we have this mental frame to use mutually. So the framework is valuable if it's in your own head. It's extra valuable if the people around you have it as well, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
So there's 5 perceptual positions. The first position is self. It doesn't take a lot of work to know what's happening there because we spend most of our lives looking through our own 2 eyes. The second perceptual position is that of other. And this one is way more difficult than you'd imagine to execute, because most people would say, oh yeah, put yourself in their shoes. And that ain't it. It's not me in your shoes at all. It's you in your shoes, right? And so to really embody the perspective of other, I would have to know things that I just don't know. And I know you pretty well, but I would need to know, and I would need to embody your value system, where you came from, how tired you are right now, what's on your mind right now, what's important to you, what's hurting you, what you're desiring, what you're in avoidance of. I would need to embody all of that. Not from my perspective looking through your eyes, but from your perspective. And that's the second perceptual position. The third perceptual position is that of other. So we're actually in like the perfect scenario kind of to talk about this, because we're in this studio and just behind me is a glass window. And the person beyond the glass window is in many ways taking on the third perceptual position of other. It's like he's here, but not really here. He has this vantage point that is emotionally disconnected from us. And it's sort of like this outsider view. If you were in traffic and you pulled up to a red light and you saw 2 people on the corner fighting, you have a perspective that is very different than the one person and the other person.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Very different. I mean, you're not in a threat. You're not like, no one, maybe they're fighting over money. Your money wasn't taken, right? Or you didn't feel like you deserved to take the money. Whatever the perspective is, you don't have any of that. And you're kind of like having this interesting understanding, this like non-skin in the game perspective. Very helpful to take on this third perceptual position. We're almost done. The fourth one I think is very interesting when dealing in teams and organizations specifically. The fourth perceptual position is that of the group. So it's kind of like if your brand, like the All Smith brand, had its own desires and value system and personality and wants and fears and needs, what's that perspective? Like that perspective is kind of looking down on us right now, being like, I really want this to be great. I want, Bryce to look good. I want Logan to look good. I want this to sound good. I want like people to hear that, all the needs that it has. And if you can disassociate from your own self, because it isn't you, it's another thing. Mm-hmm. That's the fourth perceptual position. The fifth perceptual position is kind of like the granddaddy of them all. This is that of source, or if you're a religious person, God, you're the person that you worship. You can also take on a perspective that this is the highest expression of humanity, right? There's nothing higher than the fifth perceptual position, love, right? God, whatever that may be. And from that perspective, it's even more removed than the car at the red light looking at the two people fighting, because God loves both of them and just wants everybody to be happy, including you in the car, right? Yeah. And so I run us through those five perceptual positions just so you have it, but in any moment of disagreement, maybe a negotiation of some kind, any real conversation that is in contention, especially, you can move through all five perceptual positions and gather a truer truth than any one of those perspectives. Because what we know about even like neuroscience and the way that the brain works is that I'm only taking in a very small amount of the data of what's true around me. My brain is sort of deleting information. I can kind of only really see you. We're in this studio. I'm not really noticing the details of this room over here. There's certain light rays I can't even see. Humans can only hear certain frequencies. We're constantly deleting and omitting certain information. Now, if I could add in your perspective, that would be a little bit more. And then his perspective, I could add more. And then somehow this outside top-down view, I could see this for what it was. Maybe I could remember where I am in San Diego right now, and I can remember what the weather's like outside. I don't have any of that perspective right now, right? And so the best information, the best type of information to make decisions on is the truth. And if you can start from the premise that your perspective is definitely not the truth.
Yeah, it's very limited.
It's very limited. And it's maybe only part of it. And it's maybe not a great part of it. Now you can aggregate this kind of quality situation. And if you find that there are two people who are kind of butting heads on any particular topic, I challenge those two people to go through that exercise, honestly. And I bet there's a more agreeable footing to step on. I don't know if this is, true. I like to think things through, quite extensively. I think it's true, so we'll throw it out as a theory. I think that your ability as a leader is somehow tethered to how much time you spend in the other four perspectives. Mm-hmm. And if you're spending a lot of time in that first position, your own self position, you're probably not great at this leadership thing.
Yeah, that's a very great observation. And you've had, in my opinion, this skill from very early on. One of my favorite stories that you tell that I definitely want to revisit is when you were sitting as a freshman at the University of San Diego, listening to Coach Rich Hill and observing kind of what all is going on within the room. You weren't sure if you were going to go there. There was a few other options that you had in your pursuit of high-level Division I college baseball. And I remember you shared it with me last time where you were walking down the dorms and you started to see the names of some of these guys. You're like, how the hell am I going to get on the field? Mm-hmm. Like some of these guys are 5 stars, 4 stars, very prestigious. And I mean, you can relate that to the now with the nil and social media and how that just creates a lot more noise and volume associated with how that can impact the 5 perceptual positions. And then simultaneously, you guys are now sitting in this meeting. Coach Rich Hill is delivering a message. Did I describe that appropriately?
Yeah, that's basically it. The only other detail is when I walked down. So you're describing this memory that I shared where I'm walking down the dorm, and my floor was all baseball players. Mm-hmm. And the context is I went to the University of San Diego. By the time I'm there, I'm already committed. So there are no other options at this point. I've given up those other options. I'm here. Yeah. So I've moved into the dorm. And I am an egomaniac in a healthy way at this point in my life, I would say. An egomaniac to support my athletic goals, which is like, I can do anything. I'm easily one of the best catchers in the country. Let's go, right? And I say that because I made an aggressive decision going to that school because they had a freshman All-American catcher. So I would get there as a freshman. He would be a sophomore. Unbelievable player, like once-in-a-generation player there. And I thought that was like my only competition, which is a ton of competition, okay? And I started walking down this this dorm hallway. And at the time, of course, I'm an expert on the first and last name of any catcher who's of any stature in the United States of America. Okay. I'm walking down, I'm like, Kevin Hofmackel's here. That's interesting. And then another catcher's name. And then I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, am I ever going to play here? And so there was like this moment of like, oh, it's about to get real, and it worked out. But the follow-up is the rules meeting, which is what you're talking about. And the first team meeting, and Coach Hill comes in. And it's interesting you say that. I recently just retold this story, and I think it might have been the first time I can remember almost like disassociating or at least seeing something from two different perspectives at the same time. Mm-hmm. So I'm in the front row, freshman, rattled. I mean, the first year is just stay alive, sympathetic, just reactionary, like don't die. Like, am I going to all my classes? Like, you're just totally overwhelmed. I'm sitting in the front row just trying to do everything right. And it's a rules meeting. So I'm there observing as a player, learning about rules. But as soon as Coach came in, I just recognized what that room was, which was an adult male who feeds his family based on the behavior of us children and our ability to perform at the highest level, is trying to figure out how we will do that.
And create a framework for you guys to operate in, so it's not just a clusterfuck.
Totally. So he's trying to lay out the culture that would do that. And I'm like, oh my God. I was like, this is how you run a company, And I remember being like, mental note for later when I'm like 40.
The first introduction to your mind of the concept of transferable skills.
Totally. And I was like, that's interesting. Because it's so apparent. I mean, I don't know what your experience was with basketball, but I just remember like the levels get so intense. I didn't go to a prestigious high school. I played high level like club ball and things like that. So it's not like I hadn't been around the best players in the country. But when you get to, I mean, it's similar from going to middle school to high school. Like I played varsity as a freshman and I'm like, well, these are adults and I don't even know what puberty is. Like this is a different thing. And it was like that again in college. I got there and I'm like, what is this sport? It's 120 miles an hour. And I like got to slow this game down and it's so overwhelming. And so just seeing that, I was like, oh, it felt so apparent that at this level, you need to win and you need to win immediately. And I was just like, okay, so we have no facial hair because that will somehow lead to like another half of a win somehow, right? And we're all going to wear our pants a certain way and we're all going to do certain things at certain times because obviously that would help us win. There's no other thing that matters. You know what I mean? Like, why is this meeting at 7:51? It's like somehow that will help us win more baseball games, And I'm like, oh, this is so apparent to me. That this guy is trying to set standards that would yield this outcome. And if it didn't, those wouldn't be the standards, So that was just really empowering.
How was he able to create buy-in around those standards with people that were, for lack of a better term, egomaniacs, but coming in with a high level of high school prestige, thinking their shit didn't stink, but then all these high-caliber people in the same room with a little bit of maybe a soft narcissism where they're just like, I came here to be the guy.
Yeah.
But everybody came there to be the guy.
Yeah.
How did he create buy-in and separate and have levels to that level of just ego to use it to your advantage and then backing it off where it could benefit the entirety of the team?
Yeah. So I think a ton of credit goes to Coach Hill for like setting the constraints. There were some cultural things that did happen top down, but the real magic, and I hate using that word magic. It was a magical time. Those 4 years, we were able to accomplish something that still hasn't happened again at that university. Really overachieved. So a little bit top down, but eventually the organization, meaning the members of the group, the players on the team, would have to decide how things were going to be. So some of the constraints that helped were, it was such a rigorous environment, and it could easily turn toxic if it's misunderstood. But an idea was fueled there that, and I say this in the summit, here's the quote. I don't know who said it, but it's retold by Coach Hill, which says, "We will not accept in victory that which we would not accept in defeat." So that could be just an eyewash, nice thing to say. But if you really embody that from a leadership level in the top down, it reverberates through an organization. And what that statement means is that if you take care of the process and the things that are inside of your control and fail, you are safe here. But if you relinquish attention to detail or things that are inside of your control, it doesn't even matter if you win. You have hell to pay. That is a powerful place to be.
Yeah.
Because I think we all want the freedom to try our best, which is a vulnerable effort. At the fringe of our ability, that's where failure happens. You know what I mean? Like, I could put you under a 155-pound barbell, and like, there's no chance you're going to miss that lift. It's like when we get to 95, 105%, there's a chance for some sketchiness. That's the vulnerable part. So what is high-level sport? It's a bunch of guys or gals going out to the fringe of their ability to see really who's who, right? If you can create a culture that supports going out to that fringe of your ability, and really ultimately all you're responsible for is the parts that are in your control, you're safe. You're safe to win. You're safe to lose. You're safe to try your best. And that's what this organization is going to support. And so that comes with two sides. One is the freedom and the beauty of what I just said. The other side is that was a ruthless place to be. And the teammates were more ruthless than the coaches. You would get just hammered if you couldn't step in line about the process. You know, if you were a bad weight room guy, that was you're a bad weight room guy. You would be a bad weight room guy, Bryce. Yeah, you would. Yeah, you would cut that. This is the type of chirp that would happen. You know, what do you? This is a real quote. That's 7-Up. Are you drinking 7-Up? How old are you? Right. This is the type of environment.
And this is where Hold the Standard was born.
So gnarly, dude. Right.
Yeah, that's strong.
It's so gnarly. But I say all that story because that was the culture, but there was a shift, and this happened with a bunch of freshmen and sophomores who decided how that culture was going to be. And my sophomore year, we played the University of Texas, who just came back from winning a national championship, #1 team in the country. We swept them. Unbelievable feat, and that was the rest was history. And the from the bottom up, the group decided and policed this culture in a way that the coaching staff couldn't even keep up. If you messed up, you'd much more fear the wrath of your teammates than
just to play devil's advocate. Let's say hypothetically you did not sweep them.
Yeah.
Do you think that would have brought about some questioning of the culture? Hey, we're doing this thing, but it's not working. It's not leading to the outcome.
I think, yeah, it's a fair question. I think that baseball is such a failure-ridden sport. There's so many games. There's so much failure that it would just be like par for the course. You drop a series, you got to find a way to suit up the next day. It's not like football. I mean, I think basketball is probably the feeling you would know better than me. It's probably somewhere in between baseball and football. Football is one of these weird sports where you can go undefeated.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you can just like win 10 games and like be the greatest of all time. Baseball, you play basically every day, and your guys' schedule is probably somewhere in the middle, right? And so there's never, this sounds anticlimactic, but there's never that much weight placed on any given single thing.
Yeah.
That we'd have to find a way to suit up again and do it.
I also think it bred a really healthy relationship with failure for you.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where I think I spoke about it recently around the concept of just short-term memory. If you swing at a pitch that you probably shouldn't have swung at, it's like you can't sit there and beat yourself up about it on the next pitch. You got to let it go relatively quick. And you said something along the lines of, in an effort to seek certainty and safety, it can be really dangerous. That's almost like just never swinging.
Yeah.
Right? Or never taking the shot. Inevitably, that's almost more dangerous than not even trying to participate and be enrolled in the process. The Trident family taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good, bad, and everything in between. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. I start my day with the Sweet Cream Cold Brew as I am prepping my mind and body for fitness, service, coaching, and podcasting. With various locations in San Diego, they offer over 14 nitro cold brews and a variety of specialty drinks. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from the Keto Bakery. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code ALLSMITH to take your coffee experience to the next level.
There's this human desire for certainty, and we're a paradox, so it makes a lot of sense. We wouldn't have this strong tenure on the planet if we were just hell bent on uncertainty. You know what I mean? Leave the cave, let's ride, take chances. Let's fight a lion. However, the other side of that coin is our willingness to be curious is what brought us out of the cave and is what put us on ships, and we ended up exploring the world and puts us on this new frontier of learning and all of that. But our biology is always the older parts of ourselves is always gonna want to pull us back to safety. And, you're giving a very thoughtful sports example, but a funny example that comes to mind is, I love Spain. I don't know, it's worth mentioning. Spain's great. You should go to Spain if you ever get a chance.
I think when I was in LA last, we went to a restaurant that had tapas.
Yeah.
And that's how I knew you loved Spain.
Yeah. Go to Spain. It's awesome. Spain is awesome in part because the food is excellent. It's one of those places where bad food is excellent food, hole in the wall, great. You're just every culinary experience is just going to be elevated. And in Barcelona, Madrid, pick a city, they have Burger King. And I'm walking around and I'm reflecting, and we talked about the blogs. I always have to find something to write about. I'm like, why is there Burger King here? Because definitely the Spaniards know that there's no way Burger King messes with their tapas, can compete, right? And then I realized why Burger King is there. Burger King is there because we would rather be certain about how bad our food is going to be than take a chance and be wrong about that thing. So I know exactly what I'm going to get when I get Burger King. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to eat this meal, and I know it's bad and I'm not even really going to enjoy it, but I know, and that's safe. Right. And that's how hardwired it is in our head that they got Burger Kings all the way through Barcelona. It's crazy. So just knowing that, I think, is power. That's bringing some, to what we were saying earlier, objectivity to something that we're sort of subject to all the time. It's this little thing in the back of your mind, I really like to know. I really like to be in control. I really like to be safe.
Yeah, totally.
I just never met anybody
The
who's
fact
in
that
control.
you're able to even think that deep, though, around something like Burger King. I mean, you look at marketing 101, right? And it's most people want to spend money on things when they know what they're going to get, as opposed to potentially taking a risk. And, let's just use a shirt as an example. Maybe the quality's a little different. Maybe it shrinks after you wash it the first time, or, it rips upon you doing something athletic, or it develops a stench because the quality isn't what you thought it would be. That level of certainty is very important, but it's also if you consistently live in the realm of certainty, are you living or are you existing? That's a fair question, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're speaking to the wrong dude about that, because I will take the desire for uncertainty to such inappropriate levels to where I'm just now getting around to the idea of keeping a calendar and being an adult in many ways, because I hate the idea of knowing, like fully knowing how everything is going to be. That deterministic life is just, I hate it. And so I love this idea of uncertainty. And a lot of that comes from like the baseball days. You know, I realized we'd stay up late at night after games. I'm like, why? This is unhealthy. Nothing good's happening after, you know, at 1 a.m, 12 at night after, you know, a baseball game. And I realized it was a coping mechanism. You know, professional baseball, you play every day. It's like the circus, you know, it's not like practice. You just play games every day. And so 7:05, you put on the monkey suit and you do the national anthem, you play a game, you get done at whatever, 10:30, locker room, you're home at 11. The coping mechanism was, if I go to bed right now, it's just going to be time for batting practice that much sooner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we got to mix it up. It's like something weird's got to happen for this to feel like not Groundhog Day.
Yeah, totally.
You know? And I'm obviously very much influenced by this sport that I used to play, but failure is the other thing. You're just drinking failure out of a fire hose. You know what I mean? So a lot of my perspectives, I think, are extreme and not normal when it comes to things like perfectionism. I don't even know what that is. I've never seen it. Perfectionists are like, I'm a perfectionist. I'm like, prove it. Show me one thing that you've done that's perfect. You know, failure. I'm like, it's all I do is fail. I've never accomplished a goal in my life. I'm like,
I think it's awesome to watch from the outside looking in, though, because like you have a subtle humor about it, which I very much admire, but it also shows in like all the things that you're developing. I mean, dude, I wrote it down here. Like, you've got a strength portion of your schooling, you've got strongman, you've got bodybuilding, breath and exposure, nutrition, gymnastics, speed training, weightlifting, pain-free movement, a coach's prep course. You've got local locations, you've got remote. If people are curious, they can participate with the blog or with Deuce University. And you've created this incredible culture of like movement education where it's like Deuce is a fitness school. And I love the term school because there's an unlimited amount of subjects to play.
yeah.
And like failure is also really cool because when you look at like investments, it's like if you invest in so many different things, you can actually afford to fail in some of them and be successful in others.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there. The school thing comes from, you know, I feel like, I don't know how you feel about this, but I am very much like through the back door on strength and conditioning. You know, I learned it. I did it only because I needed it, like hit baseball further. I had this very specific goal. Didn't love it. Didn't, you know, never bought the magazines. Never was in the mirror, like trying to do it, whatever. It was just important for this kind of like high utility thing.
Yeah, it was a tool for you.
Tool, yeah. Not a pastime. And I'm not knocking the pastime thing. That's why I tell people, I'm like, if you like this stuff, like, have a ball. If you don't, like, let's be smart about it. Like, do less. Like, do it well. Like, there's no badge of honor for, like, nuking yourself in the gym. If it's fun for you, that's different. If it's not, like, let's be smart. And I say that because I feel very pessimistic about my ability, or anyone's ability, frankly, to sell fitness at like face value. It's like the worst business ever. It's hard. Everyone quits. It's so vain and high churn, and most gyms are not really even interested in, you know, you getting a result. It's like this whole marketing thing. And if you want to do it, the way you compete in that is having cooler stuff, flashier stuff, and some sort of like marketing gimmick. So I don't want to even try to compete in that. Instead, I know that skill acquisition is something that we can do forever. So if I can get you curious about learning something, that's like a whole different thing, you know, to the point where people are like, well, how do I don't know anything. How do I get fit? I would say find something you're willing to learn to the end. Like, it could be anything. If you got curious about rock climbing, I wouldn't even have to be present. And if you got obsessed with rock climbing, that would on the 9th month, introduce you to mobility training because you'd be so pissed that you couldn't fit your foot on that upper ledge. And then you would be so hungry to get stronger that you'd learn something about how to get strong. And then you would naturally be introduced to nutrition because that would help you in your pursuit. And this whole learning process would take you further than Equinox ever could, you know? And so that's what we're selling, is like an education.
I like that. And by asking better questions, inevitably people get more curious, and then they dig further.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get to the gold, but in the pursuit of gold, they find these educational pebbles that serve them within their journey, or at least that's the analogy that I'm kind of seeing.
Yeah, it's like everyone is exactly where they are, and I think this can be structured in a way that meets people where they're at and progresses forever. I mean, one of the beauties, I think, of what we do is everyone's on the hook forever. Like, there's no winning this thing. You know, you've been doing this for a very long time. You're very good at this, many things, but at this strength and conditioning, fitness, CrossFit thing. You could walk into any gym in the world and, like, whatever's on the board, you got it. And I'm sure that you also don't feel like you're done.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, it just keeps going.
That's the thing, going back to what you said around, like, the younger version of yourself, where you're like, oh, yeah, I have all the answers. It's like the further along you get in the journey, it just unlocks more questions. Like, I'm like, wow, I am just getting my toes wet in this field. And it's less about the X's and O's. And now it's kind of like deconstructing them a little bit. Like, why has periodization been talked about for so long? Does it work?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes.
Yeah.
But sometimes also not. Like, what about wave loading? What about all these different concepts that we held as truth for so long? Okay, but the program that works is the one that people will do consistently.
Yeah.
It can look beautiful on a spreadsheet, but if people don't actually want to do it, it's not super fun. Like, we actually need to find an ulterior motive. And I think the educational pursuit is very honorable because it gets the job done, but it's relative to the specificity of the individual. Totally. Otherwise, everybody would just go back and copy and paste from the OPEX model, which has great exercise physiology, great periodization and progression. But everybody tried to do that early on. It just led to burnout, right? And like, I think now it's the art of coaching, as you've talked about. It's the messy middle where you're actually using it to build community and relationships and pulling in and tethering to the different components of ancestral living. And it's less about the movement and the training and the lifting of things. And honestly, in my opinion, more about the bonding, the grounding, the nervous system regulation. I mean, there's so much stimulus now that it's almost more important to highlight all of these other things. Like you said, you needed that time after baseball games to fuck off a little bit with your teammates and, you know, have a little get together or celebrate or talk smack to each other. And one of my favorite lines is, nothing good happens after midnight except for the best shit ever.
I've never heard that said that
so
way.
It's like, it can be a little dangerous, but it's also like Alan Watts talks about, if you're so focused on the thing, you become so obsessive that like you actually lose the 5 perceptual positions. You get narrowed into kind of just like 1, 2, or 3 of them. Right. And I actually think what you guys are doing is really cool. But what I'm really curious about is, how do you filter what opportunities to take on, what are worth it, what's not, and then learning how to empower others on your team where they take ownership for something and you can play more of a support role? Because at the end of the day, bandwidth becomes a thing. And no matter how much you upgrade your personal operating system, it's really hard to be a part of everything all the time.
Yeah, it's the classic I can, but should I is the thing, you know? And I think earlier versions of myself and most of us, younger versions of ourselves, the only filter is, can you? If the answer is yes, then you say yes to it. Ultimately, we have to get to a place of opportunity cost, you know? So everything's a trade-off, right? You sitting here with me for a couple hours means you can't do anything else for these couple hours. So you have to make a choice. Like, am I going to do this or am I going to do something else? Because this is definitely costing you something else. Meals, time to study, time to train, time to do whatever. And so I think I I should say that the 10,000 foot view of this is much like anything, only going to be as accurate. You're only going to be as precise in your decision making as your self-awareness, right? So if you don't understand yourself, you don't know what you're capable of, you're going to make poor choices when it comes to opportunity cost. But if your self-awareness is pretty good and you know where you can affect change and create value and, you know, get what you need, then you can come into choices and view this from a perspective of trade-offs. You know, I'm going to choose this, which means I have to give up X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to make that choice in full objectivity. If you don't know what you're giving up, or you perceive that you're not giving up anything by agreeing to something, then you're probably not seeing the dynamic for what it is, right? And so I just have to look at things as a trade-off, you know, and hopefully I'm making decisions that the opportunity cost is not greater than, you know, the benefit of what I'm doing.
It's very well said. Something that comes to mind as you're explaining that is, I think part of the maturation in the entrepreneurial space is, like, early on, at least for me, my decision making or the trades that I made were very much convoluted based on trying to satisfy the expectations of either others, a partner, maybe the tribe, the people I decided to orient with, and sometimes their goals became mine just by association. And as I've gotten older, I've definitely been able to realize, like, oh, that's not actually for me. Mm-hmm. And I'm very comfortable now just saying no. Mm-hmm. And it's around, like, living life according to the circumstances of what you actually want.
Yeah.
But that question, it seems so simple. What do you want? Mm-hmm. Right? We see it in all kinds of somatic therapy type things. What do you want? Let's go to that and let's, like, work backwards and build progression. How have you been able to get to that point of, like, what you want? And then how do you kind of consistently support that while simultaneously creating opportunities for others?
Yeah, if I'm being honest, vulnerable, I think that any progress I've made in that way has come from breaking the game. I sort of broke myself in pursuit of this thing. And with that came growth and some self-awareness and all of that. Now, I don't think I'm on the other side of that period in, like, health ways, I think. I don't think I'm fully on the other side of that in terms of actions. And I say that with awareness. Okay, so I'll speak less vaguely. In pursuit of what I've tried to build, I really put my head down and lost a lot of awareness to myself and what I need and who I am and what feels good. And there's a lot of, like, sacrifice that was made. And that was a painful process, sort of emerging, you know, a decade in and being like, whoa, like, who are all these people? And, like, why don't I like this? And why is it, you know, why am I angry? Why do I have this, like, resentment? I missed the plot. I got lost in the sauce. So realizing that this work harder than everyone skill is helpful, but has these kind of, like, shadowy parts, is something to notice. Now, I have greater awareness and I can make better decisions and I structure my life a little better now. And I still know that from a nervous system regulation perspective, I still have quite a bit of work to do to spend more time in this open, abundant, ventral space, fully regulated space. And my excuse would be, and this is me just sharing this vulnerably, my excuse would be, I am moving through, and I believe wholeheartedly, on the tail end of a series of very fight or flight, sympathetic inducing scenarios, starting with COVID and, you know, COVID, and then rebuilding a staff, and now dealing with the current sort of biggest important goal that I won't really get into until it's time to celebrate. But I am knowingly aware that I'm a bit in a wartime general mode. Previous, I would be in that mode thinking that is life. Okay. So I am consciously moving through this towards a place where I can create more and more ventral structures with opportunity cost in mind, etc. Certain specific ways, just so I generally speak in the clouds a lot, especially on podcasts. So I defend my time in certain ways that I never would before. Tuesdays, you can't get a hold of me. You'll never see me. And that's an all day thing that like puts so much gas in my tank that I can run through walls the next 6 days in a row. Certain time blocking things. So I have a lot of different hats that I wear I have to shift hats. That's the hardest part. This like task switching thing, like consulting strategy on an agency thing, and then, coaching movement, and then coaching coaches, and then designing something, and then writing something are very different tasks. Oh, yeah. So having buckets that those things happen in, so I can go back to the original skill that made me good at anything, which is that I can focus as well as anybody that I've seen. Now I backdoored myself into a person who doesn't focus at all and just does 5 things at once, right? And so these are some of the strategies just to give you something more concrete that I'm sort of working through.
I'm definitely seeing it. I appreciate you sharing. Something that comes to mind too, just because you and I both love the concept of transferable skills, and I talk about this often in coaching. The secret sauce is within those transitions though, right? Like just creating the time buckets or the time blocking is one thing. And showing up is this cliche concept that's like, oh, just show up and half the battle's done. But who do you show up as? Yeah. What is your strategy kind of to go from, okay, you're talking agency strategy, and now you're getting ready to go coach a strongman class. In that in-between, is there something that you do? Like, do you change an outfit? Do you snag a coffee? Do you do 20 burpees? Is there a breath work thing that you do, or is it just like you have the ability to kind of shift gears?
So it depends on what the task is, but I'll give you some examples. I've noticed that the intensity of the task switch is directly correlated to the length and specificity of the transition. So back when I was writing my book, that was the hardest thing up until that point that I've ever done. And I could task switch pretty good. I could be programming and someone could walk in and I could answer a question about whatever, payroll, and then quickly transition to coaching classes and then hop on a call to do like a salesy kind of thing pretty well. I could not do those things and then immediately start contributing to the manuscript of this book. It's like so gnarly to do that.
Yeah, that's tough.
So I had to transition, and it started as a bike ride to a place in which I would write. And the bike ride became a way to give up my mental mind share on those other things and then arrive to a place where the sole job was to contribute to this manuscript. And then also important, the bike ride back was time to transition back into the other roles. What was interesting is towards the end of the book, the manuscript got so big, and I'm not good at writing big, long things. Everything I've written was very short up until that point, is I would have to go further and further away. So now I'm in my car. I'm like driving an hour to a place, right? And then towards the end, it wasn't like I planned plane flights to do this, but a normal travel of my like consulting work, I would get my best work done on a flight.
Oh, wow.
Right? It's like the distance needed to be greater. Those are the big examples. The smaller, more sort of universal ones for me is largely based around my personality. You couldn't score another point on the Myers-Briggs towards introversion for me. So I'm as introverted as it gets, whatever. I say that on every podcast. Every introvert can't wait to tell you that. Sorry, not sorry. I'm super introverted. Time alone is like a secret weapon for me. So it's weird, but transitions that even include going home, I go in my room, I close the door, I don't even have a task to do. I don't do any breath work. Just being alone allows me to like move into the next thing. I love to think. And so if I'm conversing with other people, if I'm around other people, I can't do that.
Yeah.
Right. And so I find that just a few moments by myself in any capacity is like my secret sauce, so to speak.
I definitely relate to that. It took me a while to self-assess and study that over the course of time, but I think it goes back to the lenses you have on the world and your ability to intake. You can feel other people's energy. You can see their movement patterns. You're studying and seeing body language. There's all kinds of input coming in if you are a student of the world. I think sometimes when you're just in the self, it can be a little bit of a strength sometimes because you're actually oblivious to everything else.
Totally.
However, long term, I think it's actually a huge curse.
Yeah.
And so it's just fascinating how a lot of these things like intermingle with one another. And I guess my next question is, has the alone time helped you better trust your intuition and your internal compass to help steer the decision making that you make in your life?
Yeah, I think that we had a phrase back when, especially as a freshman, a phrase in college baseball that was slow the game down. Okay, so when things are moving fast, the goal is to like do less, slow the game down so it can come to you rather than just being reactionary. And that's such a life like transferable skill as well.
John Wooden 101, be quick but not in a hurry. That's
totally it. So in stillness, or in my case, aloneness and stillness, I feel like I can get clarity. I really struggle cognitively being creative in public, which is like something that has to show up with my job sometimes. So it's like sometimes I close my eyes when I'm in front of people and I'm like talking. That's me searching for like aloneness to think through things. And so, yeah, those times alone is key for decision making, because without them, I don't feel like I can ingest and work through things. So the worst thing I can do is make a decision, an important decision, in a group format. I'm very bad at that.
Yeah, it's challenging.
And so it's just I need to know that about myself and act accordingly, sort of.
Put yourself in the right environment to then thrive.
And a lot of people are external processors. It's like funny. It's like, and I know that when I'm with them, and I'm different than them, so I think it's hilarious that they don't even really need me to say anything. They're just thinking out loud and saying, so, but if I do the one thing and then this will happen if I do it. And I'm just like, okay. Hey,
it's like a verbal brain dump that allows them to organize the ping pong in their head.
I couldn't be more opposite. I'm like, that would be wasted words, in my opinion.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Something I'm curious about, we've toggled a little bit back and forth between your time at USD, your time now as a high-level entrepreneur doing so many different things. What's a story that you told yourself early on that's no longer serving you?
Well, hopefully I'm not retracing my steps here, but I think the clearest one was I could not have fathomed that this thing that I loved about myself, which was this willingness to grind, so to speak. It's like grind culture got so popular. Like I embraced a certain desire for adversity that I think is totally misguided. I'll give you a more specific story. This is helpful and generally more colorful and memorable for a podcast. Okay, Garnett Avenue, you know what that is? Yeah, Pacific Beach. It's where all the bars are. I'm not going to throw my teammates under the bus, but some of my best friends were in the car. And this is the type of culture that we had, just egotistical. Looking back, it's not a great attitude to have. We would be driving on like a Sunday morning to go to training, thinking we're like elite, we're like better than thou because we're like high level, whatever, baseball players, who cares? But at the time, there was this judgment where we would be driving down Garnett and there'd be all these people out in their Chargers jerseys going to the bars. It's like 9 a.m. or 8 a.m., whatever's going on. And we'd be like, look at these civilians. What are they doing? Grow up. That's not even your name on the back of all this talk.
Yeah.
Former me. Ashamed to say it, but that's the truth.
Yeah, it's honest.
Super judgmental about that lifestyle. Flash forward 20 years. You're looking at a guy who does not know how to enjoy his life. That's a real problem. If you want to make me cry right now in public, you ask me what I do for fun. I can't figure it out. I'm working on it, but I don't know how to do it. So the joke's on who?
I don't know, though. I think if I were to give my observation, you've actually blurred the lines between work and play. I've heard you say it before. You block out your Tuesdays where nobody can gain access to you, and you work. But your definition of work is writing what you want to write about, sharing it with people that are investing in the vision that you see as your life's work. So it's like, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Your form of play just doesn't fit the societal narrative of, hey, I'm going to the bar wearing a Chargers jersey. It's, I'm going to the coffee shop to write and impact other people along the way, which I view as very honorable.
Yeah, I hear that. I think that there's some truth to that. And I mean it when I say I have something to learn from those folks that I had a lot of negative things to say about.
Interesting. It's very fascinating to see that, because you would think that your time after baseball games, like hanging out with teammates, or like when we've gone out to dinner before and kind of spitballed a little bit, like that's very much enjoyment and fun. I think you definitely find ways to fit it in, and also you've built a lot of really meaningful relationships. And you just had the famous Harvey Martin out to your gym and did some cool stuff with him.
Yeah.
The relationships that you've made, you know, I think are also a telltale piece of, like, they're not just like surface level. There's true meaning and an experience that you go through with a lot of these people that you rub elbows with.
Yeah, I think all roads lead to discernment, and from a friendship perspective, I truly feel blessed to be surrounded by the best people in the world. I mean, I'm blown away. You mentioned Harvey.
Such a good
I got to stay. He got to stay with me the last weekend, and my cup is just so full, just being in his presence, you know. And folks like yourself, folks like hopefully I'll be able to see a former teammate on the way home. Yeah, I can't do the surface level thing. I don't want to do the surface level thing, and I think that if we look around, there's some people who are vulnerably doing incredible things in the world, and those are the people that I want to be next to, because I think maybe that'll help me do that, you know.
No, I totally honor that. And also, living is pursuing what lights your heart on fire. The surface level thing, especially in LA, it feels very transactional. It doesn't feel real. And you can play the game in the beginning, but it gets old.
Yeah.
And it works until it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And then inevitably, whether it's emotional pain, physical pain, you can only mask it so much with back squats and pull-ups and work.
Yeah.
At some point, it's like, what gives me true meaning? How do I want to live my life? Who do I want to share it with? And what mistakes am I willing to make to suffer the consequences in pursuit of what really, deep down, is my calling, my intuitive inner voice in the midst of extreme discomfort and loneliness, and then taking those things and thinking, how do I put buoys on these things so they can float to the surface to eventually leave the world better than I found it?
Yeah. I think that a genuine best effort has never led me astray, never led me in the wrong direction. You know, so that's the only compass, I think, really. It's like,
Yeah.
can we do?
What is something you did as a child that you no longer do as an adult? For many, that answer is play. RX Smart Gear allows for your daily workouts to turn into play and exploration. In my training, the Frevo rope gives me access to a versatile rope that I can take with me wherever I go. On the road, at the beach, to the park, or playing at home, RX Smart Gear jump ropes fit my needs. We at Allsmith trust RX Smart Gear. Their gear is always reliable and gives me peace of mind that I will have top-notch equipment to support my health and fitness journey. Hop on over to RX Smart Gear and use the discount code ALLSMITH to shop their latest cutting-edge gear. Have your gear work with you and not against you. Sounds really cool to be like, oh yeah, seek your edge. But the process of finding the edge is tough.
Yeah.
I mean, a very surface level analogy is just like hop on a salt bike and just smash it.
Yeah.
Go as hard as you can and then see where that edge is.
Yeah.
But that same metaphor can be that deep work that you talk about. You were the first person to phrase it that way.
Yeah.
And now, ever since I heard that, I'm like, okay, I'm in pursuit of that.
Yeah.
Where's the shovel?
I have a lot of opinions about that. I'm not sure. from what different lenses your audience will be looking at this from, but let's just say probably a good number of them are getting after it on an assault bike, and they know how to suffer in a gym. I think this is maybe controversial. I posed a question, actually. I'll say it this way. I posed a question, maybe on Twitter or something, which was, I'll try to say it verbatim. Is it still mental toughness to do another hard workout if there are more pressing personal development issues present? And I think that for some people, yeah, their next edge is, can I show up for myself and be disciplined and throttle myself in a gym and keep going and not quit? Mm-hmm. For you, that is a box you've checked so hard. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And, maybe we should keep doing it or whatever. But there's nothing for me to glean that's pressing by pushing a prowler. Mm-hmm. I know that the most important edges for me to explore are these parts of me that are actually scarier and harder than pushing a prowler. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's an interesting next level for a lot of us, you know.
When you posted that, man, it hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
And I think these last couple years, I've deconstructed that in me and a lot with the people in my tribe and my audience. But it very much was really cool because I said it to you briefly offline. You say all these very great things, but I wasn't ready to hear them. Mm. And then I heard that one, and it really was... The metaphor that came to mind was, I feel like this caterpillar inside of the cocoon that's like trying to put the wings out, but is kind of scared to do so. It's painful to do so because that also means that the way I identified as an athlete, which many of you guys identify as an athlete, which we all are to some extent, but when that's where you place your self-worth based on your performance all the time, forever, all of a sudden, if you're going to transcend into that butterfly, that old version of you actually has to die.
Yeah.
And for the last couple of years, for me and many other people that I was spending my time with, we didn't want to let that go. Mm-hmm. And my stubborn mind was like, why can't I do both?
Yeah.
And it's like, it goes back to that question from Chris Voss, or that concept of never split the difference from his book, which is everything is a negotiation.
Yeah.
If I want to grow into this, the dosage of that is going to have to be less.
Yeah.
And that's really scary because I know this, I don't know that.
Yeah.
And when you think about seeking your edge and the fear of uncertainty, what I think about is less about I'm scared of what's over here. More so, I'm scared of letting go of that. Mm. And then becoming the traditional entrepreneur that gets the dad bod, that gives up all these standards, thinking about hold the standard, and then getting to somebody that, okay, maybe we make a ton of money and have great business impact, but then we lose sense of self, right? Like I think there's that Buddhist quote, which is, we live backwards in the sense that we give up our health in pursuit of money. Yep. And then later on, we end up sacrificing our money in pursuit of health.
That's right.
And so there's so many paradoxes to deconstruct within that.
Can I offer you potentially a different way of looking at that?
Totally.
So this is at the heart of change behavior. I've been obsessed with change behavior and development. I don't claim to know everything, but I've been able to, teach this in some way, shape, or form all around the world. And my obsession comes from the work of people, much further along than I. But a lot of change behavior is held up by sort of what you've just articulated. We have the language would be a hidden competing commitment. Okay, so it sounds less hidden for you in that case, where it's like, well, I don't want to give up my physicality for this other thing. And I'll quickly get to the punchline, and we can talk about the details if that's helpful. But the punchline is, it's not either or. But as long as you perceive that it's either or, you will never give that up. Mm-hmm. You see what I mean? And so, yes, it's important to look at growth inclusive of loss. Like, what's at stake here? And there will be loss. You know, if I want to emerge to the next level of me, what will I lose? And there will be elements. But anytime that your mind starts to reduce a scenario, especially like a highly emotional, high stakes scenario, into like either or, just kind of like take a pause and reinvestigate that, because it might feel very heavy and weighty to you. But from my perspective, and probably from the perspective of people who are listening and watching, I'll speak for everyone. We're not really worried about you losing your fitness. Mm-hmm. You're going to be just fine. Yeah. You know what I mean? But in your mind, if those are the consequences, of course you will not change.
Totally.
I'll give you a quick thing for me, which was when I was in my depressive zone, dark zone, my growth had to come from building these reciprocal relationships. You know, how could I set boundaries and feel good around people? And the short story is, in my mind, I was committed to things that you would find very honorable. Mm. No one would blame me. They are things like being a nice person, being a hard worker, not being like too cool for school, you know, not being this egotistical leader, being a blue collar individual. So as long as I'm committed to those things, which I think you would think are generally good things, I think they're generally good things. As long as I believed that I had to give those up to tell people no, or not say yes to everything, or set boundaries in my life and enjoy my time and things like that, of course I would choose holding on to that than being perceived as a jerk. Mm-hmm. Or whatever, right? My mind couldn't see that they could both exist at the same time. And through a process that we use all the time in the gym organization, I was able to experiment with that. So you could experiment in ways that maybe you aren't already. I know you're always working on yourself, but you could experiment with, well, how much fitness would you lose to explore this other thing? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Would you lose 10%? Like, I don't know. I bet you could hold 10% of your lifts and within 10% of your lifts and really grow massively in other areas. But if in your mind you feel like, oh, I'm either going to grow in this way and, you know, have a dad bod and completely give it up and not be an athlete anymore, or I'm going to hold on to this thing that's important to me and keep pushing off this thing, of course, no one would blame you for doing that. So I think that change behavior can come when you start to expose these assumptions.
Yeah.
It's a really big assumption. And what's funny about them, I don't know if it's funny, what's interesting about them is they're always, they're often obvious to the observers.
Yeah.
Right? Like when I was going through, I'm saying too much about this, but I went through this process publicly at one of my seminars. I brought Dr. Miller up, and she took me through this thing in front of people who, many of them love me to death. And their reaction was like, yo, like they want to save me. They're like, dude, you don't have to do that at all. Like, go on vacation. Tell me no. Like, you know, they're trying to save me because to them it's so obvious. Yeah. But to me, I'm like, no, I will be an asshole, distant, egomaniac, too cool for school guy. And they're trying to say whatever in the same way that you're like, I don't know, like, am I giving up this identity as an athlete? I'm like, dude, you could take a nap for the next year and you are an athlete.
Totally. It's an interesting thought process too, because you're totally right. And I now think of it more as like fitness is a stream that's now funneling into the bigger pool of what makes up life. Mm-hmm. And it needs to be supportive of it and not taking away from it. Like old me was hitting it so hard where there was no stream of consciousness to do anything else because you needed all the recovery time and all it just bled into every element of life where it owned me. And I've spoken to many former professional athletes that have experienced that, whether it was basketball, swimming, a lot of my football buddies, same thing, because of the injuries associated with it. And what's also interesting, since we're around holiday time now, what's so fascinating with a lot of my professional football friends is that they'll go to get-togethers and like people don't know what to say to them anymore. Because for the last decade, it was, hey, I saw you on that game on Sunday. That was awesome. Or, and now they see them, they're like, hey.
How's the weather?
Yeah. And it's like now their conversation, you realize, was so transactional. Mm-hmm. And we see it all the time where it's like you go to a get-together and it's like, hey, what do you do when you meet somebody for the first time? Yeah. And then based on the response, a low-level thinker is now going to try to do the math in their head. Okay, if you do this, this is how much money you make. That's how much respect I'm going to give you.
Yeah.
And it's like funny to quantify all of these things. But if you're actually willing to sit in that over the course of time, it just comes down to like, what do you want? That same question before. Do I want to be validated for my function as an athlete? Or do I want the physicality to then funnel into making all of the other spokes in the wheel that much stronger so the wheel can actually go faster and do cool shit?
Yeah.
And I think it takes time to go through that. It does take a understanding that it needs to be not a seesaw or a weight scale where, like you said, if you're going to give this up, it's going to be this. It doesn't have to be that.
Yeah.
I think of it more now as almost like a harmony. How do they harmonize with one another? Because some days, okay, you might have more time, not as much business and other stuff going on. Cool, you might put a little bit more into the fitness bucket. Mm-hmm. Okay, other days you got more business stuff going on. You got to let go of that bucket a little bit.
Yeah.
And being okay with that. I think that's a really fun way to think about it. And I thought it was really cool, too, that you were willing to put yourself in front of the public eye to unfog your lenses a little bit to gain some personal clarity in the pursuit of moving forward in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the paradox and the hardest part of growth. Everyone I've ever met says they want it. Growth is like, all right, well, what's tricky about that is we don't really know how because we can't objectively see ourselves. So hopefully you are surrounding yourself with people that will bounce back info that's outside of your peer view about yourself, or you put yourself in scenarios that will teach you that. Sometimes sports is a good environment for that. But we definitely cannot see and perceive our own self. I mean, going back to the 5 perceptual positions, it's like, wouldn't you want the other 4 perceptual positions of yourself? Like, that'd be really cool info. That's like the ultimate 360 feedback or whatever, right? It's like, dang, now I can gather how I need to grow and learn. I mean, we have so many defense mechanisms and blind spots that we're doing a great job avoiding the ways that we need to improve. And so, I mean, the companies that like I build, there's one goal to make money, but the other goal of equal importance is development. And so the way that we set it up is this environment of feedback. You know, it's like, in order for us to work together, I have to hear from you the stuff that I don't see about myself and the way that I act and the way that I can grow and the way that I can improve, because there's no possible way that I'd be able to see that in myself. What's scary is moving through life without having any of those mirrors and then being subject to the blind spots that you'd be subject to, you know, and we have to like create those in many ways.
When it comes to feedback, I've heard you talk often around the importance of negative feedback and how valuable it is. And negative, not carrying a negative connotation, but just like definitely being in the category of like not always feeling good.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's hard to receive for somebody that's more of a positive reinforcement person.
Totally.
And how do you guys kind of decipher around meeting people where they're at, making sure they're getting the appropriate information that they need? Because those blind spots can be scary. And if there has been a track record of success, it's almost like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And you get that pushback. But then you and I both know the guy that goes from A to B, a certain set of a framework will work. But if you're trying to go from B to C, you're probably going to need an upgraded or newer framework.
Yeah, I'm firmly of the belief that negative feedback is the source of growth. Disconfirming information, I think, is the best way to say that, because it's not just verbal negative feedback. If you had an experience that gave you information that disconfirmed your worldview, okay, so we can think of maybe a quick, silly example. Let's say you were saluting the CrossFit flag so hard in 2014 that if someone mentioned to you the use of accessory work, you'd be like, "No, bro, we don't isolate a hamstring. Get out of here." Yeah, because that was your dogma. That was the frame in which you saw the world. And then a CrossFit Games champion would come around and be like, "Yeah, I really got after these, glute ham raises and did some bodybuilding on the side, and it really supported my ability to tolerate a week of CrossFit Games competition." You would have to either make that person wrong or then include that into your worldview. It would break your frame and grow your frame. And, that's a less painful example. It's not someone telling you about your personality traits or your behavior, but that is disconfirming information. And so I usually articulate this very clearly just to make it clear. If I told you everything that you already knew, let's just say I told you 1,000 things right now. If I printed out 1,000 things that you already believe to be true and I just read them back to you right now, you wouldn't leave this room different. You would be the same. But if I included things in there that changed or broke or challenged your perspective, there's a chance for change, growth, right? And that is the premise for why this disconfirming information is important. It's funny that you mentioned, and many people do this, like, well, it's negative feedback, but it's not like negative in the sense of and people all the time want to, they raise their hand in the back of the room. Can we call it like constructive criticism? And I'm like, call it whatever you want. It's not positive. Okay. And the fact that we are so ready to be like, oh, but it's not, is why it's so hard. We curate this information out of our language. Most low performance workers and organizations exchange information that is vague, slants towards the positive, and we withhold the harder negative elements of what we do. I mean, anyone who's listening that has a real job, think about an employee or someone that you work with. And when I say this sentence, let's say the person is name's Gary. I always pick Gary as the made-up name. Sorry to all the Garys out there. If we worked with Gary and I said to you, dude, Gary was going classic Gary yesterday. Okay, that statement is me sharing a gripe about Gary's, let's say, dysfunction in the workplace. I say that sentence, you know exactly what I mean. And every other employee knows exactly what we mean. But we never tell Gary. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And Gary is forever beholden to this growth edge that maybe is in his peer view or maybe not, but we are in full knowledge of this elephant in the room, but not able to articulate it. Better teams articulate that because they know that's the juice for growth, right? And so, yes, it doesn't feel good. Growth doesn't feel good. But to answer your question, the way we do that is through a specific rite of passage. So generally the best teams in the world, in my opinion, have a rite of passage that is either explicit or implicit. We have an explicit one, which is called Coach's Prep. Just long, annoying. You can get a job at every other gym before this one. It's generally like painful, not really, but like psychologically challenging and delays gratification. And anyone who goes through this process, we know has a higher level of willingness and more trust is in the system than if they didn't, right? In the same way that if I think about any of your basketball teams, if they just pulled someone from the audience at halftime and brought them into the locker room and put a jersey on, you guys would be like, no, like, I don't even care if he's good. Like, what? Who are you? You're not on this team. You didn't go through our thing. You're not a part of this thing. And when you have unique levels of trust and willingness, you have the stage is at least set to share that information. a lot of the reasons why people don't give feedback because it's hard. And it's generally not worth it. Right? If you don't have trust in the system or you don't have extra willingness to like do that hard conversation, you won't. And most people don't. And that creates an environment where teams, not only will they not get better, they can't get better.
Mm-hmm.
And so we try to remove that by bringing this explicit conversation around, this whole thing is going to run based on our love and obsession for negative feedback.
Yeah. I think that's a very, very valuable skill to have in the workplace for sure. How do you curate it over the course of time, right? Like you're doing a great job with development, it sounds like. But you and I have heard it time and time again within the fitness industry, like growth potential becomes very challenging. Mm-hmm. And simultaneously with that, when you become a high performer in the fitness space, you eventually hit a ceiling based on the hours in the day, the amount of people you can see. Now things are evolving where you can have an online presence. And then obviously there's entrepreneurial endeavors and products and things that kind of grow, or branches that grow from that foundation. But Simon Sinek talks about it all the time. Like if you're a high performer in the workplace, who do you then look to for mentorship and growth? Because, okay, maybe you're developing the skills, but is that adding to monetary growth, impact growth? Do you feel valued and appreciated? Those are all things that in the workplace, if you're going to continually strive, you've talked about it time and time again, you don't want to make the same money in 2024 that you made in 2023.
Yeah. This is a tough answer because most fitness businesses, in my opinion, my observation, I've seen a lot of them, not all of them, but most of them are built in a way that the outcome you're talking about is not possible. I've still never seen a person paid by the class who's making a salaried living wage of one of fulfillment, one with like unlimited top end potential, because you're trading time for money.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Sean Pastuch just said that. I had him on a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, Sean's plugged into that too. And I think that you can design this in a way that has unlimited top end potential, but it's rare. I believe that we've done that, and maybe others have as well. I'll just give my opinion rather than try to speak universally here. I believe that the way forward is through a model of shared leadership. Okay, so I believe that leadership, first of all, our definition of leadership is very simple. To be in leadership is to be responsible for the results, period. Any person of any age could do that. 100% of all people in any organization could be in leadership based on that definition. And it generally sets the stage for the culture that we're trying to establish. Now, if you believe that leadership has that definition, then it takes on a quality like love or responsibility. It's like, how do you divide that? Right? Like if I take 80% of the responsibility for this conversation, does that mean you can only take 20? I think we can both take full responsibility for this moment, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so if we look at leadership that way, then we can share it. And so the way the company is designed is we have no desire to try to create a career out of just trading time for money coaching fitness classes. It's like, what are you willing to take responsibility for? And so people build a salaried career based on how they can bring value and grow the company. And so almost no one does just one thing. And through that perspective, we share a percentage of revenue, and people can do unlimited things there. I mean, they can even open their own gym under this. It's endless of what they can do.
It's a very cool team framework too, where it's like everybody's kind of leaning on somebody else that may have a little bit more expertise in one arena and helping, and kind of just like there's a lot of push-pull, sounds like.
Yeah, and you can't ever just say, hey, like, I'm off the clock. Yeah. It's just not a thing that you can do. It's just not how we work. There's a responsible party, a responsible individual for every single thing that occurs in the company. And so it's a culture of people taking responsibility, which anybody who's in leadership knows that when someone takes responsibility, it's much easier to hold someone accountable to that. I actually can't hold you account to something that you didn't take responsibility for. right?
Very well said.
And so most people there is no possibility for that, because you're right. You run out of hours in the day and you're looking around, I don't know what else to do. Well, the other model that we have is that you're building leadership skills through these experiments. You're taking on a subset of the company and growing that company. And you go capture the flag and bring it back. Look what I was able to do. Look what I learned. I learned about marketing, and I learned about communication. I learned about leadership by expressing this in one particular way. That's like our take on it.
I love that, man. A couple more questions for you. One of them is around, we touched on it really extensively in our previous episode, just around your book, Going Right, which I love the little blurb that you have alongside that, which is a logical justification for pursuing your dreams. If you were to give somebody kind of the elevator pitch on that book, what would you kind of describe it as?
Basically, I believe that for most of us, at some point in your life, you felt excited or motivated. You had like a dream. Maybe it's a played out word, but you had a dream. You like wanted to do something. And I believe that culturally we've made that into an emotional thing. It's almost like there's a pep rally for that. And then the pep rally gets over, and then we start to use our rational mind. And I was really perturbed by how many people were seemingly rationalizing, moving away from pursuing their best self, because they thought it was more logical, more reasonable, more understandable to concede their best self for something that's more socialized, someone else's path, right? So I figured that writing a, pep rally of a book and appealing to emotion was not the way to reconcile what I was observing, all these adults giving up their best selves. So I tried to tap into what I felt when I got done with baseball, which was, technically I should be very scared right now. I've never had a job. My whole life was devoted to hitting baseballs far and catching and throwing baseballs. But I feel a certain amount of calm in my ability to have success in whatever based on that experience. And like, why is that? And I realized that there's some unique characteristics that are available to you if you're willing to pursue your peak expression. And those characteristics are valuable in their own right, but they're also have this high degree of skill transfer. And that's beautiful because I'm trying to give the shortest story possible. That's beautiful because it doesn't matter if you make it. I mean, I didn't, and every single day I'm informed by my pursuit of Major League Baseball, and so it's ironic because the safe route is actually only safe until it's not, and then it's very dangerous.
Yeah.
The way I used to describe it when I was talking about the book a lot is like, to be 55 and to have never met yourself and have no skills, never done anything hard, you have no resilience to adversity, you have basically shown up and tried to not get in trouble at work for the last 30 years is a horrible place to be.
Yeah.
That is an unremarkable individual. And as an employer, I'd rather hire somebody who has gone to the end and failed and led an interesting life than the latter.
Yeah. That's such a great way to describe it. It's also one of those things along trying to do something worthwhile, as opposed to just settling for something that maybe society wants for you.
Totally.
I just think you spoke so profound on that. And it just leads me to, you have talked recently around the producer versus like the consumer mindset. Does that relate a little bit from the book, or is that evolved afterwards?
Frankly, anything I've said recently around the producer and the consumer thing is actually it's actually darker than that. It's around like, I think that's at my worst, I start to view people as one of two things. You're either creating things or you're destroying things. And I'll give the nicer version. We have this statement around our company, which is observer is not a role. I'm uninterested in any expression that does not have skin in the game. Like if you're just chirping, like that's not a thing. There's no room for just observers around here. Are you going to tell me like your negative opinion about this thing? We have this statement that's similar, which is if you have a complaint, we want to know what your commitment is to. Right? Like, I don't like how this room looks is a non-sentence in our organization. I don't like how this room looks, and here are the 7 things I'm committed to doing to make it better.
Yeah, solution-oriented.
Is a skin-in-the-game approach to that thing. And I don't know. I think that just to, whatever, cry about it, I'll be a victim for a second. I think that when you're in the world doing hard things and making things, that sometimes it's hard to keep an arm's length away from people who are just talking.
Yeah.
And have opinions and want to break things down.
That's why it's so important to stay out of the comments, man.
That's right.
What are some of the upsides of group dynamics to help increase some of the clarity? I've heard you talk about that quite a bit, and it's working in groups is tough, man.
Working in groups is very tough. Complexity goes through the roof when 2 or more are gathered, as the Bible says. 2 sides of the same coin. One is complexity is high and dynamics can be, let's say, dysfunctional. The good news is, and I can go into any organization and have this conversation and turn like a toxic thing into the potential for greatness, which is there is so much wisdom in groups. Earlier, and I gave that example about Gary. You know, I encourage y'all to not make that hypothetical. Think about your work. Think about the most annoying employee, and just know that when you say, typical Gary, why is it that everyone on your team knows what that is, but it's something you can't talk about? It's that is the dysfunction of the team. I use this framework, not mine, someone else's, the 4 conversations that every group is having, and this will bring light to your question. Every team in history, every company, every family, you could even say, is having 4 conversations. The first conversation is the explicit one. So between you and I, if there was a transcript of every word that was said, that's the explicit conversation. The second conversation is the conversation that can only happen before the conversation. So if there was anything in the other room that you and I could say together that we couldn't say on here, that's that. The third conversation is the conversation after the conversation. So if there's anything that we can't say on here that we'll say to each other after, that's that. Mm-hmm. The fourth conversation is the conversation that you're having in your head, also very dangerous. There's so much wisdom in 2, 3, and 4 inside of any team, family, group, that if they were to be made explicit, there's unbelievable opportunity for change. Like Gary would know that he's dysfunctional as all get out. Mm-hmm. And we'd have a chance to change that. It would be an uncomfortable conversation. But like literally everyone knows this is a problem. We're just not telling him. Those elephants in the room, when made explicit, have the chance for greatness, any team.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we can all think back to, you might be in it right now, a team that you're on that's like going through something. Everyone knows. Like the things that you can't talk about in a team are known by everyone. Why can't we talk about them? Yeah. You know, that's the signature of an elephant in the room. Mm-hmm. So in group dynamics, I view this from a leadership perspective as, I say like building a container. It's like, how well can you curate the container to do this type of human being interacting? Yeah. And if you can't talk about conversations 2, 3, and 4, probably there's a lack of trust and or willingness in the system. That's how I would look at it.
Yeah, that's very, very well articulated. I've heard it time and time again. The most successful people are comfortable having the uncomfortable conversations. And typically, everything that you want is on the other side of the shit that you're avoiding.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful to sit there and think about it. What is the best advice that you have ever received?
Oh, man. That's tough. I hope I am giving you my best answer. I'll probably be in the car and think of something else. My dad used to always say, this is good. My dad used to always say, if you're going to do it right. And I don't think that is as dogmatic as it sounds. And I don't know if he had the language for it, but how I hear that now is, like I said earlier, doing things to the best of your ability will like never lead you astray. You know, he would tell me when I was little, I'd like, you know, whatever, I'd use like, you know, a hammer to do something that wasn't like for a hammer. You know, like, you know, if you're going to do it, like do it right. Like don't just, you know, that's not the best way, I think is what he was saying. And I think it's cool because it provides this agency. It's not just responsibility. It's not just like step in line. It's like this agency of like, hey, like trust your intuition.
Yeah.
Do it right. You know what right is. I'm not even going to tell you what right is. Do it right. You know, I think is really powerful.
It's funny. My dad used to say, there's two ways to do things, right and again.
That's right.
I hated it at the time. I love it now. I'm just going to do it right the first time. I clearly know what right is.
That's really good.
What's the worst advice you've ever received?
Man, I think there's a lot of projection. I think everyone is projecting onto us themselves. So if it sounds like they're talking to you, they're kind of talking about themselves. And I got a lot of advice to reconsider what I really wanted to do. You know, I talk about this in maybe an overly dramatic way. It's true, but it's helpful to use the same people as like an example. But, you know, when I wanted to, at a very young age, be a Major League Baseball player, you get asked the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? That was my answer. But a lot of people wouldn't let me walk away yet. They'd be like, well, okay, but what's the other one? And I would just like have to come up with an answer, you know, like an architect. Can I leave now? You know? And, you know, those same people are the ones who are like, you're living the dream, baby, when you're doing it, you know. And they're like, don't, you know, make them take the jersey off your back kind of thing. And then when I was like, I think I'm going to open a gym, you know, and the feedback was like, well, you know how many memberships, you know how many $150 a month memberships you got to sell? To like, I don't know. And those same people are just like, you know, that's what happens when you stick to it. You know, it's kind of this like front runner thing. You know, they're projecting their fear out of like positive intent, projecting their fear onto me, you know? So I think the bad advice I've gotten is just around, trying to convince me to move away from what I know to be true. I don't like this. I didn't like this advice at face value, but there's a fellow gym owner. I don't know if I should say his name. Successful gym owner in the community, who we were like rapping at lunch, just talking about work, I guess, industry stuff, just catching up, and it was specifically around coaching other gym owners, because at the time that we were doing a lot of that. And he was like, yeah, these guys come up to me all the time and they're like, you know, I want to open a gym. Like, how do I do it? Should I do it? Da, 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 da. And he goes, I tell them all no. I was like, ugh, like I don't like that, you know? And he said, well, hear me out. He's like, I figure if they listen to me, I saved them a lot of heartache. They shouldn't have. But if they don't listen to me, they have a chance. And I was like, all right, respect. I
actually really like that. It's fascinating too, because in my experience, what I'm going through now is maybe 2-3 years ago when I first started the podcast endeavor, everybody was rooting for me. Everybody was like, oh yeah, follow your dreams. Like, you got this. Because they see, like, similar to what you talk about in your book, like, hey, you're going after the thing. You're doing the thing. And then, like, you get a little bit of success. You kind of climb the ladder a little bit. And all of a sudden, they start tearing you down a little bit more, those same people, because now you're actually doing the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't really think you were going to make it early on. They liked the idea of you going after the thing, thinking that it wasn't going to actually come to fruition. And when you stubbornly persist in the pursuit of your dreams and you don't think about the end game, you think, if I water the soil every day, if I tenderize it just a little bit, if I reposition this plant in the sun, something's eventually going to sprout. And if it doesn't sprout, we're going to keep trying. We're just going to keep trying. Or maybe we'll get some more seed. And it's just like this game of stubbornly persisting in pursuit of what makes you come alive. And something that comes to mind around the best and worst advice questions that I asked you were the concept of trailblazing. There is no roadmap.
Yeah.
There is no steps 1 through 10 to follow. But that famous Emerson quote, "Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail." Fuck, man, that makes me come alive.
Yeah.
Because it's like, now you're carving a path for somebody else to do something similar and add their own spice, add their own art, and do it their way. That's Frank Sinatra, man.
Yeah.
I did it my way.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's what I'm thinking about now, where before it was like, oh, I want the instruction manual. And now I'm like, I love the instruction manual, but as Rogan would say, this whole world is made up, man. We're on a floating rock going around this ball of energy. The founding fathers were no smarter than you and I, and they eventually led to people smoking cigarettes that eventually did some really cool shit in the world. The best we can do is at least try.
Totally. In the book, I use something called the cosmic calendar to help people remove themselves from these like socialized stories, right? Like, so a socialized view of life would be like, well, get good grades in high school, then go to the right college, and then work at Google or whatever. It's like obviously, like, that's the way. And the cosmic calendar is like shrinking down all of existence into one calendar year. So the Big Bang is midnight on January 1st, and this moment right now is December 31st at midnight. And it's like, I think agriculture was discovered like 3.5 minutes ago. You know what I mean? And like, the car was invented like 9 seconds ago or whatever. And it's sort of funny because it puts into context this thing of like, well, what even is high school and what is college? And Google is just like a hiccup in the grand scheme of things. And it's like, zoom out a bit, give yourself a little credit. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I did that for baseball. Like, what even is baseball? It's like a bunch of idiots, chasing a leather ball around a park. That was invented like, 100 years ago. This is nothing. This is all made up, And so it would be a coincidence if you're destined to follow something that like 11 other dudes did before. Like, what? Like, why would that be the case?
And one of my favorite things about you, Logan, is you really redefine what's possible.
Oh,
you're not one guy. When you go to the dinner party and people ask, like, you probably throw out gym owner or entrepreneur of some sort because it's easy. But there's layers to you, man. And I think there's layers to most individuals in the world. And one of my favorite things to think about is at the time before cars were invented, the question was brought up like, hey, like, what do you think is the next iteration of transportation? And the answer was always faster horses.
Yeah.
And it's like, you started a gym. The perception was, oh yeah, bodybuilding, bro, cover of magazines, like, let's pursue peak performance and all these things. You've turned it into an educational platform. You've used fitness as a vessel to help guide people towards their peak expression, pulling in so many different modalities, including where we first met, which is the Strongman seminar with Rob Orlando.
Yeah.
And, helping people understand the maneuvering of awkward objects, which transcends and translates real life very well. Mm-hmm. And so thank you so much for making the trek down to beautiful San Diego from Los Angeles and playing a little ping pong with me today.
I'm glad we could do it in person.
I know, man. Where I'd like to finish things up today, man, you have a couple signs that I absolutely love. The first one being, you don't have to work out here to kick it.
Yep.
Something along those lines.
Yep. You don't have to work out to kick it. It's like it says strict enforcement. It's like a very official looking sign that when you look closer, is pretty tongue in cheek.
And it's great, man. Like there's so much elitist mindset sometimes in the fitness world of like, oh, you're not one of us. And it's like, we're all human beings, man.
Yeah, it's such a wild thing. I've never seen, and this is negative, but it's just an observation. I've never seen so many people miss the point, like just because you have double unders does not mean you're better than someone else.
No way.
It's insane, some of the behaviors that creep in there. And so I find that people will rise to the level of expectation that you put upon them. And I think that we do a lot to tell people how it is here. By here, I mean the gym. It's like, no, we are students. And when you come through that gate over there, you're coming to learn, which sort of neutralizes any of the weird behavior that you see at other gyms. And I think everyone I tell that to goes, and they are relieved. And I wonder if no one ever told people that, how many people are being awkward or even standoffish, even really want to be like that. Going back to group dynamics. It's like, I'm being this way because I think that's how you're supposed to be in these environments, And so we want to build as many of those frameworks to where people are the way that we want to be, which is nice and caring and open and reinforce that,
Yeah, totally. Jay Shetty's favorite question, when he first started his podcast, he would always ask people, if you could have a billboard, what would you have it say? But you actually have a billboard, and it says "Influencers pay more."
Yeah, the marquee sign. That was a fun project, making this marquee sign, like where you put in the letters and make it say stuff. That's one of my jobs, and it's surprisingly very few characters. So it's like the haiku of like cheeky things. So I gotta like make it work character wise. Yeah, the current one says "Influencers pay extra," which the internet was up in arms about in good and bad ways. Yeah, it's always fun to like find something cheeky to put up there. People have given us a lot of feedback that they enjoy those. I think it makes the gym more personable. Sometimes it's like we're right on Lincoln Boulevard. There's like 50,000 cars drive by a day. A lot of them are in traffic. I mean, one time just said, "Traffic, am I right?" And like people were calling in like, "You guys are hilarious." So it's fun. Yeah.
You're killing it, man.
Yeah.
Your ability to blend art into the world of health and fitness is super cool. Your merch is kicking ass. And where can people find you guys, man?
Yeah, deucegym.com. If you go deucegym/university, that's where all the education's at. You can get CEUs from CrossFit in there, which is cool. You can find me at Functional Coach on Instagram and Twitter.
Not on Tuesdays, though.
Yeah, on Tuesdays. I'll get back to you later. Yeah, and then the book's on Amazon, Going Right.
You think we'll see another book in the coming years?
I used to like throw up a little bit in my mouth when people ask me that. Probably, not immediately, but probably. Yeah, I think I'll dip my toe back in.
I look forward to it, man.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For those of you listening or observing on YouTube, if you enjoyed my conversation with a real-life legend, Logan Gelbrich, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Until next time.